In 1905, Russia saw unrest throughout the empire, leading to protests and riots, including a general strike in Finland organized by the Social Democratic Party. The SDP demanded the dissolution of the local Finnish Senate, who were appointed by Russian officials, the absolution of censorship, as well as a demand for universal suffrage for the Finnish people. Quite remarkably, under pressure from the rest of his empire, the Tsar agreed to create a Finnish parliament and granted universal suffrage, as well as the pausing of Russification in Finland, with elections to come soon. The two largest bodies in Finnish politics in 1905 were the Social Democratic Party, or SDP, and the Finnish Party, which was split into the young and old Finns. The SDP formed the Finnish labour movement in 1899 amid ongoing industrialisation and strive for socialist values such as universal suffrage and 8-hour working days. Strikes and protests were organised by the SDP, and although the party pursued quite radical reforms at a time when workers didn't even have the vote, they sought to achieve their goals through peaceful and legitimate means, working with the Russian state. The Finnish party formed during the Fennoman movement and was pivotal in the effort to promote Finnish nationalism, holding many key positions during the late 1800s, allowing them to maintain Finnish autonomy. In the last decade before the 20th century, the young Finns broke away from the old Finns, becoming more liberal, with a distinct difference in their perspectives of Russia. As Russification ramped up in 1899, the young Finns adopted the policy of passive resistance in an attempt to deter Russia from continuing their oppression due to their strong dislike for the overbearing state, whilst the old Finns focused on maintaining influential positions in the Diet and appeasing their overlord. The Agrarian League formed from two parties in 1908 to represent the farmers and peasantry from the agricultural areas of Finland, which wanted more control over decision-making in Finland and supported the unlikely independence from Russia. The agrarians were in opposition to both the socialists, who drew support from the cities, and the Finns, who they thought didn't pay enough attention to the issues of farmers. The Swedish People's Party represented the minority Swedish population in the country who opposed the Fennoman movement that had raised the prestige of the Finnish language in favour of the Svekoman movement to promote the prestige of the minority Swedes in the country. They were anti-Russian, having been the losers of the last war, and were more conservative than some of the other parties, with many Swedes making up the middle class or elite of the Finnish society. The 1907 parliamentary election results were as follows. The Social Democratic Party, 80 seats. The Finnish Party, 59 seats. The Young Finnish Party, 26 seats. The Agrarian League, 9 seats. The Swedish People's Party, 24 seats. The Christian Workers' Union, 2 seats. Following the years of army strikes, the Russian military felt the Finns to be unreliable, and the Tsar waived Finnish conscription in exchange for taxes in its place. In 1910, following numerous dissolutions of the parliament for one reason or another, the Russian Duma passed an imperial bill consolidating much of the power given to the parliament back to the Russian Duma. From a British handbook, the bill was a measure for the destruction of Finland's constitution and the unification of the duchy with Russia in language, education, finance, customs, laws, monetary system, and press restrictions. The bill saw attention from 120 members of the British Parliament, 165 members of the German Reichstag, and 150 representatives from France, many of whom saw this as the beginning of the end of Finnish independence. With the outbreak of war in 1914, Russian troops were stationed in Finland to the agitation of the locals in order to prevent any chances of a German invasion. This, compounded by a leak from the Russian government detailing the empire's plans for the complete Russification following the conclusion of the war, spurred a new sense of Russophobia and animosity within the locals. One group of Finns so determined to gain independence travelled through Sweden to Germany, forming a Finnish Jaeger or light infantry battalion. Between 1915 to 1918, roughly 1,200 men trained and served on the front lines against Russia, and since Finnish conscription was abolished during the crisis of 1905, the Jaegers would have been the best trained and most experienced Finnish troops during the Weltkrieg. In February 1917, revolution swept through Russia as the Tsar was overthrown and a new provisional government composed of moderates and Bolsheviks was set up to stabilize Russia and continue the war effort. During the turmoil, the Social Democrats, who had won an absolute majority of 103 seats in the 1916 elections, put forward the Power Act, declaring autonomy from the Russian state in all matters apart from military and foreign relations. This was supported by the agrarians, the local Bolsheviks in Petrograd, and some young Finns, but rejected by many conservatives who called for the provisional government to step in and dissolve the parliament. The bill passed with 136 votes for and 55 votes against. Upon hearing this, the provisional government rejected the legislation, dissolved the parliament, and scheduled new elections for October. With tensions high and political rivalry heating up, both the Conservatives and Socialists started forming their own paramilitary groups, with the Red Guards on one side and the White Guards on the other. These groups acted as a self-policing force for their various regions, with the Workers' Order Guards operating in several socialist towns and the Protection Guards doing the same in some agricultural areas, both with the same intention, to assert dominance and security in case one side or another were to try and seize control. As October rolled around and the election came about, the votes were counted as such. The Social Democratic Party, 92 seats. The Finnish Party, 32 seats. The Young Finnish Party, 24 seats. The People's Party, 5 seats. The Agrarian League, 26 seats. Swedish People's Party, 21 seats. The old and young Finns with the People's Party formed an alliance during the election, with an official moderate coalition forming to oppose the socialists. This gave the moderates a combined 108 out of 200 seats, having wrangled 11 seats off the socialists from the last election. In the same month, the Bolsheviks overthrew the provisional government, and with Russia spiralling into full-blown civil war, Finland's conservative coalition passed the Power Act on the 15th of November. It's important to note that this legislation had been proposed by the SDP earlier in that year, when they had a majority in government before it was dissolved. The SDP, frustrated that they had failed to gain power following 2 majority election wins in 1905 and 1916, having been dissolved of that power on both occasions and now left out of a conservative government, ramp up the debate on revolutionary methods. In these sessions between the 25th and the 27th of November, the SDP, who had always been far more moderate than their Bolshevik neighbours, decided on using parliamentary methods instead, but did not completely abandon the idea of using force to gain political power. The Red Guards also grew in number as Russia fell into anarchy and the SDP became disillusioned with their lack of progress, losing more political authority as the year went on. This in turn caused the White Guards to increase as they were concerned over the growing threat of the Reds, with each beginning to establish their strongholds in the country. The Reds controlled much of the proletariat industrial south, whilst the Whites hold the vast swathes of the agricultural north and east, with pockets of resistance in each half of their sectors. Per Svinhuvud, leader of the Young Finns, forms an all-conservative cabinet which is known as the Svinhuvud Senate on the 27th of November, drafting up a declaration of independence which is adopted by Parliament on the 6th of December. By early January, the nation had received recognition from the Bolsheviks, Germans, French, and Swedes, securing their independence on the world stage. Many fledgling nations faced political turmoil whilst finding their feet, and Finland would be no different. The Conservatives and the Socialists continued to clash throughout the winter, with the Reds organising strikes and protests, while the Whites continued consolidating their grip on power. Between the beginning of September and the end of January, the White Guards had risen from around 150 units to 400, whereas the Red Guards had gone from around 40 units to 370. On the 15th of January, Carl Gustav Mannerheim, who had served in the Imperial Russian Army during the Russo-Japanese War, as well as the Weltkrieg, was made Supreme Commander of the White Guards, subsequently named, on the 25th, the White Army of Finland. He was tasked with turning the unorganised Whites into a fighting force that could fend off the more centralised, urbanised Reds. He began by moving his headquarters away from the Red-controlled south to Vaasa, where he and his 24,000 men, of whom only the first rank had weapons, surrounded a Russian garrison which surrendered 15,000 rifles. The Germans agreed to sell 70,000 rifles to the Whites at the end of 1917, and started sending back the Finnish Jaegers. However, only those supportive of the White cause were allowed to return, with some 450 men being left behind in Germany. Meanwhile, the Reds, organised by Ali Aaltonen, another former imperial soldier from the Russo-Japanese War, who had taken part in the 1905 revolution against the Tsar, losing his position in the military. On the 13th, Aaltonen purchased weapons from Lenin in Petrograd to support the Reds, with the Helsinki Guard being organised on the 23rd for revolution on the 26th, whilst Russian soldiers delivered 20,000 rifles to the Reds from their depots in Helsinki and Tampere. The shipment of 15,000 rifles from Petrograd was sent on the 27th, guarded by 400 men of the St. Petersburg Finnish Red Guard. On the same day, near Viipuri, Whites and Reds clashed at Kamara, where the local railway station fell to the Whites, who intercepted a telegram reporting that the Great Gun Train would be travelling through. Dismissive of the likelihood of capturing the well-guarded weapons, only 60 White Guards were left behind to ambush the train, and they failed in their mission to seize the goods on board, only delaying it for a short while by derailing the locomotive. With both factions coordinating their forces, clashes breaking out in towns across the country, and political discourse coming to a standstill, Finland entered a state of civil war.